With this event that happened a few years ago, whereby I uncovered, I had these text messages come through from these random people who presumably had seen the sign I left for Amanda in Warminster, believing that she was there at the time and believing that she had blue hair. I put a video on my channel, sort of noting that like she had blue hair now, as one of the comments I made about, I presumed about her from having seen someone who looked like Amanda. I then received text messages and phone calls from various people claiming to know her, and yeah, this is evidence of gang stalking. I'm sorry to say, this is evidence of a collusion between several different groups of people to stalk and harass me, and I don't know, try and even get me framed for false charges of stalking and things like this. Like if they're trying to get me to ring this travel lodge or Premier Inn or whatever. But like most people would refer to that as a persecutory delusion. And I'm just going to quickly now remind everyone of the definition of delusion as it stands currently in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the fifth version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So this is how delusions are defined. Delusions are fixed beliefs that are not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence. Their content may include a variety of themes, e.g. persecutory, referential, somatic, religious, grandiose. Delusions are deemed bizarre if they are clearly implausible and not understandable to sane culture peers and do not derive from ordinary life experiences. The distinction between a delusion and a strongly held idea is somewhat difficult to make and depends in part on the degree of conviction with which the belief is held, despite clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity. Now, there is no clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity, so for that reason already it is not a delusion per se, even by this definition. This definition does not. What I do have is, in fact, I have the numbers of the people who called me. I've screen recorded evidence of the text that they sent. I don't know if I have that particular mobile phone anymore, but those messages should be on that mobile phone wherever it is. I expect it's at my dad's house. So yeah, like going through this definition of delusion, one thing that is absent from this definition of delusion is that the belief needs to be false. Clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity. Now reasonable is actually a pretty slippery term to some extent. What is deemed reasonable by one person, it may be deemed unreasonable by another. There's no clear and distinct definition of what counts as reasonable and what doesn't. The term reasonable, a reasonable person, is really rather subjective. You're always going to find someone out there, for instance, who's going to watch this video and just believe, because I have a diagnosis of such and such, that everything I'm saying must be crazy talk, right? And because I'm diagnosed, with this, I must be that, and so on. I could never be a reasonable person. Only they're a reasonable person, and people who believe in the same socio-political framework of ideology are reasonable people. And it's not possible for anyone else to be reasonable unless they believe in the same things that they do and have the same beliefs. Another thing that is fairly slippery here, that if they are clearly implausible and not understandable to sane culture peers and do not derive from ordinary life experiences. Now, not understandable to sane culture peers, that's define culture. What exactly is our culture? What is our religious framework, for one thing? From what elements of our culture is our part of the culture? Are we within the mainstream of culture? Are we like most ordinary people, or are we sort of like part of more of a bohemian type of subset of the culture? Do you see what I mean? We don't necessarily all have the same culture. We are in fact multicultural here in Britain, so it's that is slippery likewise, and do not derive from ordinary life experiences. A lot of things do not derive from ordinary life experiences. The experience of being gang stalked, for example, is not an ordinary life experience. It is certainly something that is not typical for most ordinary human beings. So yeah, it is hence very hard to understand for most ordinary human beings. You know, I grant you that, but it doesn't, however, mean that it's false. And the word false, that crucial word, and this is how this definition of the term delusion slips away somewhat from the way that delusion is defined in the dictionary. And the dictionary, I believe, still considers a delusion per se to be something that is demonstrably false, something that could not be the truth, and is provably false. And you know that is truly a delusion. What this is, like, clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity. Clear is a little bit soft, I think. They've replaced the incontrovertible, which is a very nice term to invoke, I think. Something, you know, evidence that is absolute. It's absolutely false. Clear is a bit wishy-washy, in my opinion. Reasonable is a little bit slippery and subjective. Delusions are fixed beliefs. Likewise, again, like, what about my beliefs are fixed? Like, this evidence I have of gang stalking to some extent. Like, yeah, and then I got Callum fucking Pryor following me about for years, making videos about me, like chopping and changing my content, pretending to be Amanda in various email communications he sent to me, pretending probably to be various people on my channel, posting comments, you know. And yeah, and I'm not amenable to changing light of conflicting evidence. Like, the evidence for this particular thing I'm talking about in this video actually isn't conflicting with any other evidence. And also, like, by the way, like, when it comes to evidence, whether or not we choose to accept at face value or to accept people at their word when they say, "Oh no, so and so couldn't have done that." No, that it's just nonsense. That they'd never do something like that. Like, why do we choose to trust that necessarily? It could be lies for all we know. It could be just, or it could be their impression of them, and they're just naive and wrong. There's that possibility also. We're very flawed when it comes to seeking the truth. The truth is often very, very hard to pin down, and you know, finding out things takes detailed analytical thinking. It doesn't take knee-jerk assumptions, certainly not prejudicial judgments, cognitive biases, and all these different things that get added into the mix, or believing, our capacity to believe falsities, our capacity to fabricate evidence, our capacity to manipulate people into large groups of people into disbelieving something, so it loses popular assent. And these are the sorts of tactics that they try to employ. I mean, even in this hospital, you know, with them shining their flashlights through my window every 15 minutes when I was first on the medication, and then they lay off and say, "Oh, the medication's working now, and oh, you can finally sleep." Well, it's just falsification of evidence, you know. It's ridiculous. But yeah, and like it says also here, in fairness to this definition of the term delusion in DSM-5, it says the distinction between a delusion and a strongly held idea is sometimes difficult to make and depends in part on the degree of conviction with which the belief is held, despite clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity. So that's the full sentence. I would like to believe that if there's clear or reasonable evidence regarding its veracity, and that undermined it, what it might very often not do, if the evidence seems clear to a lot of people, which goes back to this idea of not understandable to sane culture peers. If most people don't believe in something, like I was going to say, the litmus test for people believe for something being true is most certainly not how many people believe it. That is also worth saying. Like, for instance, if you go back to the Middle Ages, almost everyone, almost everyone would have believed that the sun went around the earth until Copernicus came along, and then everyone ignored Copernicus until Galileo came along. They persecuted Galileo for asserting rightly that the earth goes around the sun and not the other way around. And this is what people are like. People are rather stupid and ignorant, and their thinking is facile, flimsy, and not based in sound understanding very often. Merely because large groups of people believe something is not the litmus test for the truth. In fact, if anything, you could level an equally good argument that that large groups of people believing something means it's probably false. If a lot of stupid people believe in an idea, it's really likely to be incorrect. That's the truth, really. Clearly, and not understand all the same culture peers and do not derive from ordinary life experience. Well, like, for instance, like looking through telescopes at the night sky, like, I wouldn't have said that's ordinary life experience. I would have said that's an extraordinary experience in life. That's beyond the ordinary. That's beyond, washing the dishes or doing a tax return. That's a really profound experience you can have in life. And that's where we gain things like understanding of the motions of the planets comes from. What else do I want to say? Like, I was interviewed once before I was about to be sectioned again by this psychiatrist called Panos Prebrazanos. And he said, delusion is just something that not everyone else believes. Not everyone else believes. So it's got to be believed by everyone to be the truth. Do you see quite how stupid that is? Do you see quite how unnerving that is also? That is the masses don't believe it, so it must be untrue. Or it must be a fixed false belief on your part. Or it's merely idiosyncratic. It's merely a strange idea. Or an unlikely occurrence, or an unlikely suggestion. Even things that are unlikely happen. That's the point about it. This is actually what my mother constantly said about this idea of a murder plot at the University of East Anglia. But it's so unlikely. Actually, if you take all the factors into consideration, is it really all that unlikely? That if they could, someone would try to murder me to shoehorn their own children into a large inheritance? It actually seems fairly likely to me that someone would try. She has direct experience of Norma Atkinson, who's my grandfather's second wife, my mother's stepmom, doing exactly the same thing with her own two children, with Grandad Peter's estate. So the same thing is happening in this case. It's for this reason that I just put out a video saying that I don't believe anyone should be able to disinherit their children. And frankly, maybe you should only get one shot at marriage. Really, I think. I don't think people should maybe get married again after one marriage. To get with the right person the first time, or don't get married. Well, actually maybe not. Maybe that's a silly idea. Maybe if you have children with a second wife, and they just add to your number of children, and the inheritance gets shared between more people, because you might end up having more kids. But the inheritance should go to the children, obviously. It's just their amount of life security. And it should be taxed as well. I think we should have inheritance tax. But that really is a topic for another video. Tell quite how scary this is. And the person who wrote this, who put this definition of term delusion in her blog spot, Lisa Bortolotti. I tried to email at Birmingham University the other day, but the NHS prevented me from doing it because it said the connection was not private. There's this paragraph from her. First, as many philosophers and psychologists have noticed when commenting on the DSM-4 definition, Davies et al. 2001, delusions need not be false, and being false is no longer a necessary condition for a belief to be delusional in the DSM-5 description. That is so terrifying, is it not? Actively suppressing the truth like that, with diagnosis of mental disorder. and using that to stigmatize someone, to marginalize someone, push them to the fringes of society, make the bad thinking, the heretical thinking go away. The things we don't like, the things that question authority, or the things that show authority in a bad light, we want to push all that to the fringes. And it doesn't matter if a delusion is the truth, must suppress the truth, must spread falsity, keep people gulled with bullshit and nonsense and lies, and keep them pliable with their comforting fictions. But the truth, very dangerous to establishments, very dangerous to the state, possibly. Not what you want getting out. Do you see that? And that's how this system's operating. That's why I'm a political prisoner, more or less. For being a whistleblower, trying to expose corruption within the state. The state doesn't want it en masse, by the way. It's seeking to protect its own reputation. If it's got in the media, it would be a shitstorm. But it could be. But c'est la vie, isn't it? I say that all the time now in the video. I don't know why, but you get the point, I think. It is worth mentioning, this stuff, I think, and it's worth continuing doing videos about it, so I will continue. Thank you for watching. I love you lots. Bye.